the Modi government now looking very closely at the sedition law. Will it actually go ahead and do what pretty much seems the unthinkable in Indian politics? It's a big move. The Modi government has told the Supreme Court that it will re-examine the sedition law and reconsider the provisions that go along with it. Sources have told India Today that the sedition law rethink comes at the Prime Minister, who is looking to re-evaluate the necessity of colonial laws in present times. Sources say the Prime Minister is cognizant of divergent views on sedition law and concerns are being raised at its misuse. The centre has asked Supreme Court to not consider the petition challenging sedition law and wait for reconsideration exercise to be conducted by it. The Home Ministry has filed 3-page affidavit before the Supreme Court on the sedition law. Days after it filed another affidavit saying that Kedarnath judgment that upheld the sedition law was correct and does not need to be considered by a larger bench.
Undoubtedly, the sedition law should be repealed. However, the affidavit which the government has filed in the Supreme Court seems to be a rather curious submission. Now it's up to the Supreme Court whether they would want to give quietus to the matter in view of the government's assertion, or would they like to go on and adjudicate on all those petitions which say that the sedition law, which Mahatma Gandhi said is the prince among the political sections of the Indian Penal Code, should actually be read down from the Indian Penal Code.
All right, viewers, this is going to be huge if the government actually decides to re-examine the sedition law. The sedition law has been used state by state to suit its own political purpose. There has always been debate on the sidelines which seem to suggest why must our country still keep following archaic laws that have been set up in colonial times. What's interesting is even England, which actually was the origin of the law in India, has repealed the law in England. However, India continues to follow these archaic laws. In the very recent past, there have been multiple cases where state governments, even the centre at times, has exercised the sedition law to suit its own, many would suggest, political purpose. Is there a way right now that the government is looking to re-examine the law? Is their intent is the big question, that it will go ahead and repeal or reconsider the various provisions under the sedition law. To give our viewers the latest flashpoint that had happened on the case of sedition, well, sedition was slapped by the Maharashtra government on the Rana couple because they threatened to recite the Hanuman Chalisa outside the Chief Minister's residence. However, having said that, sedition is not always entirely the tool of certain governments. It's been followed by practically every political party across the states in India, most times to attack their political opponents. The latest there, of course, coming in that the centre might now relook at the contentious sedition law. That's the big question. Will the government bite and actually go ahead and repeal this archaic law? There's been so much criticism on it. With that, I want to now quickly shift focus to the other big developing news today. Viewers, today, after what had gone down in Jahangirpuri, bulldozers came to the CAA hotspot. Remember, 2 years ago, Shaheen Bagh. However, the bulldozers did not roll. In terms of demolition, just some scaffolding was removed, but politics peaked.
The demolition drive in Shaheen Bagh began early on Monday. At 10 a.m., additional police and CRPF were deployed to keep troublemongers at bay. At 11 a.m., bulldozers started rolling in for the first escalation.
शाहीन बाग में आम लोग सड़कों पर निकले हैं, दुकानों में जहां पर जो मौजूद है हर कोई विरोध में आकर खड़ा हुआ दिखाई दे रहा है, लेकिन इन सब के बीच एमसीडी का ये बुलडोजर आगे बढ़ता हुआ आप देख रहे हैं। इस वक्त विरोध जबरदस्त है और उसकी कहानी आपने देखी कि कैसे बुलडोजर के भी सामने इस तरह से लोगों का गुस्सा दिख रहा था। अब आपको जल्दी से दिखा देते हैं, ये जो महिलाएं थी जिन्होंने अपोज किया था, जो इसके विरोध में थी, उन्हें लेकर दिल्ली पुलिस गाड़ी में जा रही है।
At 11:30 a.m., the drive started amid opposition by locals. Many staged sit-down protests, while others climbed onto the bulldozers.
आप बताइए क्या बोलिएगा, यहाँ बुलडोजर शाहीन बाग में इंक्रोचमेंट हटाना है, बट हमें नहीं लगता कि इंक्रोचमेंट हटाने के लिए
कि हिंदुस्तान में मुस्लिम वर्ग जो है वो सेकंड लार्जेस्ट पॉपुलेशन है, हम किसी भी तरीके से डरेंगे नहीं।
The drive was stalled till noon when AAP MLA Amanatullah Khan arrived and met locals. At 12:10, amid sloganeering, the MCD officials noted illegal construction and resumed the demolition drive.
Take a look at that. Ashok, show to our viewers of how finally the bulldozer is starting to demolish the first structure. This is under, of course, the orders and the plan of the MCD. Now, according to the MCD, this had been in the plan. It is not immediate. It is not a coincidence. The anti-encroachment drive was being planned for the past few days, but because of looking at law and order situation and whether they had enough deployment as well, they were not yet sure. But right now, they have decided to go ahead with it.
At 1:30 p.m., the MCD bulldozer moved on to other areas without demolishing any big building. By 2:30, in a major blow to Netas opposing demolition drive, the Supreme Court refused to interfere with the Shaheen Bagh drive.
Now claiming that they
With AAP and BJP ensued in a massive face-off over demolition drives in Delhi, this doesn't seem like an end to the whole episode. With Pooja Shali in Shaheen Bagh, Bureau Report, India Today.
Khalisa versus Azan Rao has now moved to the national capital. Navneet Rana and her husband, both who were charged with sedition incidentally out on bail, were in the national capital. While Amravati MP Navneet Rana is in Delhi, Maharashtra government has moved court seeking cancellation of her bail. The Maharashtra government in the affidavit has said that Navneet Rana violated her bail condition as soon as she stepped out of the hospital yesterday. Rana is being defiant, said that she hasn't violated any bail condition and that she'll continue to fight for justice. The Maharashtra government has alleged one of her bail condition was that she will not be speaking to the press about the case. Navneet Rana has violated that bail condition and has been seen speaking to the press. The couple met Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla, apprising him of their version of what transpired. Before leaving for Delhi, Navneet Rana mocked the Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray, saying that he only rose to power because of his father and that he should learn good governance from ex-Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis. The Amravati MP and her MLA husband were arrested by the Mumbai cops in April 27 and slammed with sedition. They were later released on bail.
किसी के नाम पे बैठकर खाना बहुत अच्छा है, पर खुद के हिम्मत पर खुद के पसीना निकाल के काम करने में बहुत अंतर है. उद्धव ठाकरे should take a lesson and take a training from Devendra Sahib how to rule state, because Devendra Sahib has showed in 5 years no against action with anybody opposition. He worked silently and he worked in the favor of Maharashtra people. He's not worked against any opposition. So you should take a class from Devendra Sahib. Uddhav Thackeray ने जिस तरीके से धोखा देके बीजेपी के पीठ में खंजर खोपा है, उन्होंने हमको सिद्धांतों का ज्ञान नहीं देना चाहिए. सिद्धांतों का ज्ञान हम लेके चलते हैं, तो उन्होंने नहीं सिखाना चाहिए.
All right, viewers, let's shift focus now to the Indian economy. The Indian rupee has had its worst fall if you look at the historical context in the country. Well, the Indian rupee has followed now by 50 paisa to get our viewers 51 paisa to an all-time low of 77.41 against the US dollar. The Ukraine war is taking a toll on the global economy. The effects have started to show. The Indian currency dropped by 51 paisa on Monday. The latest data shows the RBI reserve pile has dropped below 600 billion for the first time in a year. The slide comes just days after the US Federal Reserve hiking lending rates by 0.5%. As many as 21 countries have hiked interest rates over the last couple of months. The rate hike has been forced by a surge in inflation across the world. All right, viewers, let's quickly move on to the other big developing news that is emanating from the island nation and our neighbor, Sri Lanka. The latest Sri Lanka Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapakse has resigned amidst massive protests, clashes and curfew. His resignation is likely to pave the way for a new cabinet in the crisis-marred country. Earlier in the day, Rajapakse supporters clashed with anti-government protesters. At least 16 people have been injured till now. A legislator from Sri Lanka's ruling party also shot dead an anti-government protester and then took his own life during a confrontation outside the capital. Now a national curfew has been imposed and army has been called into Colombo. Sri Lanka has plunged into weeks of economic crisis stemming from foreign exchange shortage, which has led to a shortage in essential supplies, even food. All right, I want to cut across to our executive editor, senior executive editor, Gaurav Sawant, who's joining me right now. Gaurav, is Sri Lanka now teetering possibly at the edge of civil war with what we are witnessing?
So the situation is very tense in Sri Lanka. It's virtually on the verge of civil war. There's shortage of food, there's shortage of water, there's shortage of medicines, there's shortage of fuel, and the army is now on the streets. Why is this happening? The problem is, even though the Prime Minister has tendered his resignation to the President, the opposition wants the President to go too. The President wants an interim government, a national government. He wants the opposition to come on board. The opposition has said they will not do that. And the situation is becoming so bad that when these protests were taking place earlier today, a ruling party MP, when he was surrounded by protesters, he shot at a protester and then, according to some reports, shot himself dead when he was chased. Another MP's house has been set on fire. So the situation is deteriorating. India helped as much as we could, but the foreign exchange reserves are so low, and while militarily President Gotabaya Rajapakse and Prime Minister or former Prime Minister Rajapakse, Mahinda Rajapakse, they were able to handle the situation security-wise. Economically, the country is on the verge of collapse.
Appreciate you joining us, Gaurav. We're going to keep a keen eye on all developments. I would reckon things have also gotten worse because the civil society is also out in protest because there is such an abject scarcity of basic supplies like even food, fuel. We're going to keep a keen eye. Our reporters are going to be on ground getting our viewers the latest. I want to quickly now shift focus to the other big development, and viewers, that comes in from Russia. Watching our fact check segment where we bust certain claims masquerading to be facts on social media platforms and WhatsApp groups. There's a claim floating about suggesting that the very popular song Kola Berry D was a rip-off or a copy of a Turkish commercial. The fact check on that is incorrect. The Turkish commercial came 4 years after Kola Berry D. With that, it's a wrap on 7 at 7, but you do stay with us. On the other side is To The Point with me.